Hello, my name is Iles and welcome to the Temple of Antennociticus up here in Benwell in the west end of Newcastle, just off Hadrian's Wall. Now if I took you back in time 1900 years, we would be standing in the Vicus, the civilian settlement just to the south of the fort of Condicum, which was a part of the frontier defences of the Roman Empire. Now, we know so much about this area because of the fact that in the 1930s they were building this housing estate that I'm now standing in today, and they did extensive archaeology. And because they did this extensive archaeology, they were able to preserve some elements, such as the Temple of Antenociticus in front of me, and alongside that as well, the Vallum, which is just over in another location, and I'll do another video about shortly. So right here we have the Temple of Antenociticus, and I'll take you around it now. But it's quite an interesting temple because the native British, as far as we know, but archaeology is always increasing, always expanding, didn't worship in temples. And so because they didn't worship in temples, they would probably worship in wild spaces around springs, woodland areas, places like that, maybe a high hill or something like that where they would do their ritual sites. Because of this, the Roman style of worship was quite markedly different because they would build these stone-built temples, which you can see like the one of Antenociticus, which is in front of us. So why don't we go inside and have a look? We would enter through here, and inside we have an area for the worshippers. And you would enter here, and then at the far end there would be the plinth where his statue would stand, and there are also altars which were dedicated by worshippers as well, thanking the god for various things. Now the British didn't seem to worship their gods in human form. This was quite a Roman thing, and it's called anthropomorphizing, and it basically means taking an animal and giving it human characteristics. Great examples of this are characters like Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, you know, characters you'll see in day-to-day life or in films and TV and stuff like that. So because of that, the Romans would take the British deities, which were generally animal spirits or had personified tributes from nature around them, and they would turn them into human figures. Because in here, when they did the archaeology, they discovered the head of the statue of Antenociticus. Now, it was larger than life, it was larger than a modern day person, and you still have his head today in the Great North Museum, Hancock. He's got very, very youthful features. He looks like a teenager or a young man with very youthful features. And on top of that as well, he's got two horns coming out of the top of his head, and these two horns are quite interesting. To me, they look like goat horns, but they're animals' horns coming out the top. So he's similar to other woodland deities, such as Silvanus, the Roman god of the wilderness and the wild places. So the Romans then took Antenociticus from the natives and they adopted him as one of their gods. And you might be going, why would they do that? They've got gods like Mars, I've mentioned Silvanus, Jupiter, Minerva, all of these deities. Why would they need a British god as well? And the likelihood is that what they were trying to do was bring the British on side. If you imagine you living up here and around the time Hadrian's Wall's been built, the Romans have come through your land and they've put a massive barrier through it. They've said, this is our land now, and then to the north of it is an area not allowed to go anymore unless you get express permission from the Romans, and that's going to be very unlikely. So they've taken over this land, and you're angry at them, you've been defeated, you've been subjugated, and now you're having to deal with the Romans here. So what the Romans do is they adopt a local god, and they say, well, that god, we'll worship him too. We'll bring Antenociticus into the Roman pantheon, we'll start worshipping him as one of our gods, and suddenly you go, well, they're worshipping our god. That's quite a big thing. And so maybe the Britons would come along and they'd be involved in that worship. They'd come inside, they'd see the Roman style of how they worshipped things and how they worshipped their gods, and maybe they would pick up the Roman style. They wouldn't maybe opt to put offerings near a spring or a wilderness place as they had done before, but instead maybe they would bring their offerings into this temple. And so because of that, they're bringing themselves into the Roman world, they're adopting the Roman culture, and they become a bit more of a part of it. And so that's quite a big thing, and that's my personal belief, and likely as well many of our archaeologists and historians' point of view as well, of why they took this native god and they brought him into the Roman system. We also here have two altars, and these altars were dedicated by Roman officers. So we know that a legate, a very senior Roman military official, a tribune, and a commander of auxiliary cavalry all dedicated altars to this god. And when they dedicated these altars to Antenociticus, they wanted to show that they were honoring him, they were bringing sacrifices to him, and it might have been for the welfare and the safety of their men. They didn't want the native god to curse them. Or it may have just been for the fact that he was brought into the Roman religious and cult calendar, and instead this was an important time of the year, so you honoured him at this time of the year by doing that. And so you have these quite senior officials who are honouring this native British deity. We also have a centurion from the 20th Legion thanking Antenociticus for promotion, or praying for a promotion as well. So again, we have this other element where he's seen as a powerful god who can make people change their minds, who can give you promotions, give you benefits as well. So it's a very interesting one to look here in northern Britain and see a native British deity who is then brought into the Roman system, given a human body, carved and standing here as a larger-than-life shrine right here in the heart of the Roman civilian settlement on the northern frontier. And we know his name today because of someone building this shrine. Other native British gods, we don't know their names because they weren't honoured, they weren't brought into the Roman system. But this one here, he's brought in, we remember him because of that. They built a shrine, he becomes a Roman god until eventually his temple is demolished and he's forgotten until we just rediscover him. So even though there's loads of questions that are left behind of like, what did people say when they were inside this worship site? What did people feel when they were worshipping this god? Was he seen as still a nature deity, or had he taken on other powers, you know, to give promotion to military officials and things like that? What were his key characteristics? What did people feel? Was it something that anyone from the local area could come and pray to? Or was it a specific group of people who ended up worshipping this god? When these are questions that we may never know the answers to, but when I stand in a place like this, I sit there and I go, how did people feel when they were worshipping in this place? And so I love taking people to locations like this and explaining the stories of these characters, these people, these deities and these spirits that were a part of Roman Britain and were important 1900 years ago. And yet today we can still look at their remains of their temples and of their worship sites and find out a little bit and get a small glimpse into their life. So I really hope you've enjoyed listening to this video, that you'll want to come along and listen to another one, and that you'll join us for another part of the story of the northeast of England soon. So thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.